Hello and welcome to part 1 of building an arcade machine using Bob's CNC E4 router. For this build I'm going to be using a 1/4 inch diameter routing bit, and that's going to pretty much cut all the pieces that are required to build this machine. This machine is going to be a mini build with the dimensions being literally 1 foot, around 1 foot wide and tall. So it's going to be a very tiny machine. I have a 10-inch monitor that's going to go inside it, and I'm going to be housing the PS1 Classic modded inside the machine. So it's not going to use joystick and buttons, but it will have the PS1 controllers. So what I did to begin with, after sketching up my design, this is a side piece, and everything on the inside is going to be pocketed, with the exception of these two pieces right here. That is the top piece, essentially the roof of the machine, and this is the underside, which will prevent the glass from moving forward if the machine were to ever tip over. So once I had finished my sketch, what I did was make a 1/4 diameter circle and just went around the whole machine and made sure that it was able to fit there, and that ensures that the router can actually make these cuts. Now the inside pieces are used for support, so all of these are going to be pocketed by 1/8 of an inch. So these are going to be sunk into the side piece by 1/8 of an inch. And it needed to have overcuts. So an overcut is basically the router cannot cut the inside of this piece perfectly squared because we're using a round bit. So to compensate for that, we need to add an overcut, which is what these circles are doing right here. So this creates a dog bone joint shown here, and that way the square piece can fit the corners inside. So I'll also dog bone this joint out and this one over here. Software I'm using is called Adobe Illustrator. It's a 2017 version. And these pieces right here I'll leave as is. We're going to be using ESTLCAM software to make our G-code. So once we're done here in Adobe Illustrator, we're going to take it to ESTLCAM and then make the settings on there. So I'm done pretty much setting this up for the CNC router. What we need to do now is export as a DXF file. ESTLCAM will recognize that extension and can open that file when we move over to ESTLCAM. Here's the DXF file open, and the first thing I'm going to do is this outside edge, because we want the machine to cut on the outside edge, so we need to choose part, and that's going to create that toolpath on the outside. Once you click the vector line, it's going to ask you to choose a toolpath depth. So this is how deep the router bit needs to go into the material. I'm going to put 0.25 because I haven't purchased the building material yet, which is going to be 1/2 inch MDF. But I'm pretty sure when you measure your material with a caliper, it doesn't always end up being exactly 0.25. So it might be 0.24, 0.22, whatever it is, good to measure with a caliper for this setting. Alternatively, you can add a little bit more of the dimension, like let's say 0.26. in case your router isn't level and it's not reaching that bottom point to cut through the whole material. So once I get the material, I'll come back and change this number. For now, I'm just going to leave it at 0.25, and the router bit that I'm going to be using is the one that I called 1/4 with a diameter of 0.25, and the depth per pass is basically saying how deep every pass is going to be. So right now it's at 0.04 of an inch, and ESTLCAM does a pretty good job. If you hover over something, it'll give you more information, but I'm going to be choosing, I'm just going to leave it as 0.04 since I haven't really worked with this router bit, sort of like trial and error. So I'll give it 0.04. That's going to be quite a few passes just until I get used to the router bit, and you know, I'm able to turn this up and figure out its threshold. And the XY feed rate, I'll put it at 30. The I guess this would be the plunge feed rate. I'm going to leave it at 25. It's not fast, but it's not too slow either. And that takes care of this. So that's it for the outside, and you can see the thickness of this router bit that's going to go around, and it seems to be getting everything pretty well because we checked with the circle and moved it around. Okay, now I'm going to select this bottom piece. Now this has an overcut because the base is going to fit here. It's going to be pocketed to fit in here, and then I'm going to glue it. So we're going to go to the hole button and choose to make a hole out of this. Okay, I had to redo this, re-choose this hole because I don't know what it was doing, but I got it now. And you can see here that we have this corner here that has not been routed out. So just out of curiosity, I'm going to select this piece and I'm going to go to automatic functions and add corner cuts. Here's our preview of the corner cuts. So I'm going to hit OK, and you could see this tiny overcut, but that's not how much overcut we need. So in this case, I'm going to take off the overcuts and just hold this one out over here, and then also hold this one. So now we can actually zoom out with the mouse wheel, highlight everything here, and this is where we can set the pocket button, and that's going to pocket it now by 0.125. So it's gonna slightly overcut, but I'll be able to kind of just use this as a guide to center it and glue it. At the same time, I'm going to choose to hold the rest of these pieces, and I can just select this one, I can select this one, all of these different pieces at the same time, because they're all going to be pocketed 0.125 except for those. So now I'll select everything within this range. Yes, you have to select everything, has to be inside the box, and I'm going to choose to pocket, and I'm going to choose 0.125, which is already chosen for me. Okay, and zoom in and make sure everything's good. And that's everything on the inside that I need pocketed. That's gonna fit something. So here we have a bit of an issue with the overcuts. So I'm gonna select this piece and I'm gonna add overcuts. And see if that compensates for the lack of circles that I had there. But for me, it doesn't really matter because all of this is going to go on the inside, or it's not going to be seen. So that's the reason why it should be pocketed with this bit. So we've got to make sure that when we select one of these pieces, it doesn't overlap, or you don't click it again and add another one, because it will redo that part of the routing. So just add some overcuts here. Even if it looks kind of messy, I can work with this. Okay, everything is ready now. And it's time to just double check ourselves. So one thing I forgot to add was holding tabs for the outside of the piece. That way it stays in place when the router finishes cutting it. So I'll go to the holding tab button, click on it, and this will allow me to choose where I want the holding tabs to be. So I'll click on the top, and since I'm using thicker material, I'll increase the holding tab length to about 0.5, half an inch. Put one over here and one over here on the tail, and maybe one over here. So we got 4 tabs. That should hold it in place, and that's the length of it. So I just need to use the saw and actually lower that to about 0.2. We don't need that big of a holding tab. We just add one more just to be safe. Okay, so our first file for the side piece is ready to be routed. And I'm going to take this to the router and route it out. And then we'll start doing each individual piece and go from there. So this concludes part 1 of the build, but in the end we're going to have a full-blown mini cab built by the router. And thanks for watching part 1, and I'll see you in part 2 where we cut this out using the router.